Spend any amount of time in fiction and you'll quickly begin to see a pattern, and that is going to be third person. Third person is really good because you can reach soaring heights and then you can dig deep into a character's thoughts. So you can begin to see why it is so popular and used for a variety of different types of fiction. There are two main subtypes within third person, the first being limited. So you can imagine limited as just being the thoughts are limited to that character, but there's also going to be this narrator that tells you about the world. It's usually very toned down, so it still feels like the narrative is told through the chosen character's voice or head. And then it even allows you to jump heads depending on the chapter you're in or how you wanted to space out the narrative. But you can have multiple main characters this way, whereas with the first person, it's a lot harder to actually switch.
Third limited is in a lot of ways the gold standard for both a lot of fantasy and a lot of sci-fi stories. And I think the reason for this is because it can borrow a lot of the strengths of first person, but still keep some of that distance and epic scale of third person. It's really strong at jumping heads because you are saying the character's name and saying it over and over again. When you want to have more than maybe, I would say 3 or 4 different characters, really start looking at third person. It's just such a strong POV for those types of books.
There's even a style that's become very popular recently called deep point of view, where it almost attempts to blend the first person, third person style. Really popular example would be a Game of Thrones. Notably, Tyrion does this in his chapters. The focus will be on him. It'll just tell what's happening in the scene, and then he might comment on it, and you'll see it in italics in the text. Tyrion's having a thought, basically, and then it goes back into the third person limited. So it does a really good job of blending this proximity to the character.
A good exercise, I think, for most writers is to look at the character that you are writing the POV in. Look at the setting that they're in. How does who they are as a character affect the way that you are writing this POV? If you have 2 different characters walking through a city, as an example, and one of them is a foodie and loves food, how do they see the city? How does that change the way that you describe the city? If you have another character that's an architect, how do they see the city? If you have another one that's a historian or some kind of womanizer, how do those different characters see the world, and how does it affect the way that you describe the things that they see and the actions that they perform? This is when you can really start to master third limited by presenting the depth of your characters through your POV descriptions.
Now, third person omniscient is what it sounds like. The narrator knows everything, characters do not. Classic example, Dune, it actually will head hop consistently throughout its chapters, giving internal thoughts. In a sense, it can actually lower stakes because everyone's thoughts are laid bare, basically, but it still maintains this breadth that I think is really impressive. 2 other really unique examples are the brothers Karamazov and East of Eden. So the story will use I as if the narrator is talking. It's an unnamed person talking. It's basically like a local. It's odd at first. You think it's going to be a first person type story, but really it's just a framework for the third person view to take over. It's an omniscient style. Karamazov is an odd one because the narrator becomes this character in itself. They will constantly talk about the characters through like a gossip style, or they'll even apologize and say that they don't know XYZ thing about the world, but they think they know. The characters even have their own internal monologues and thoughts. So you're starting to wonder, how does the narrator know these things? But we've come to call it polyphonic. It's really cool because it gives the characters all thoughts, just like with Dune, but it doesn't really take a stance. It almost has this amoral sense to it. Characters aren't in the right or wrong, they're just acting, and then narrator is just essentially reporting on that. East of Eden is really similar because it has a narrator kind of hop in every now and then and even tell you about the landscape or about the world and how it's going. That's where it kind of breaks into what I call the narrator to history. Really classic novels like Les Miserables, Moby Dick, Hunchback of Notre Dame, they are a classical style of writing where they almost commentate on the state of the world at the time that they were written in. I don't feel like we really use that style anymore. I feel like it can be really jarring or take you out of the narrative, and also makes the books really long.
Make sure that whichever type that you are choosing, you are not breaking your POV. For example, if you're writing in third limited, you need to make sure that you're not accidentally writing it omniscient. There's a phrase like, little did he know. That phrase, it forces your story from third limited into third omniscient. Make sure that when you're in third limited, that you are only giving information that that third limited POV would know. Let's say you have a scene where one character is talking to another character with their back to the door. And then in the scene, you as a writer say, the door burst open and it was their father. And the character turns around and gasps and said, oh my God, it's my father. That is a kind of thing that is breaking third limited. You are describing what is happening behind the character before the actual POV person sees it. They're small things, but you should look out for these things in your writing to make sure that you're not accidentally slipping into some kind of narrator omniscience without realizing it. And this is where a lot of this benefit of omniscient comes. There is a small moment in the Fellowship of the Ring in Bree. The hobbit's ponies dash off and leave them in the dust. The innkeeper, Butterbur, feels really bad about it. He buys them a horse, and there is a moment where the narrator says, now this was a really bad moment for Butterbur at the time, but he didn't know that these horses would go to Tom Bombadil and then Tom Bombadil would bring them back and he would get his money's worth 3 times over or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but those kinds of moments where you pull back from the story and you as the narrator can give context that's outside of the actual timeline is a lot of the strength of omniscience. You can zoom into the future, zoom into the past, and give a lot of this historical context that the third limited character wouldn't necessarily be thinking of. This is the power that omniscience has.
So based on that, you're probably wondering why even bother with third person limited? It sounds like too much work. It sounds kind of stupid. It's very immersive. It really brings you close to that character. It feels like you're right there with them and experiencing their world. That's the immersion I think you want to hit on. You want to pay attention to these details. So it's worth the time to engage with some of these things. And lastly, there are some lesser known types that we haven't talked about. Second person, that is when you employ you as the point of view. This is very rare, so there's really not much to say about it. It does occur, just not very frequently. The 5th season is the most well known, and even then the book doesn't use second person for the entirety of its length. The takeaway though is that with you, to use it sparingly, most readers find it tiring to read in the you perspective because it's hard to imagine that you yourself are doing these things. There's third person objective. This is where you have no character thoughts. This is really popular with mysteries. Think Agatha Christie novels. They maintain their mystery because you don't know what the characters are thinking. The other one would be a first person plural, we, as the main character here. It's basically a collective tells the story. Ayn Rand did this in Anthem, her novel. Know that it does exist, but it's honestly not very popular for good reason.
One of the things to talk about side by side with POV is this concept of psychic distance. John Gardner talks about this a lot in The Art of Fiction. He describes narrative distance as existing on a spectrum from distant summary to immediate lived experience. The farthest away in psychic distance would be like saying it was winter, and then slightly closer would be saying it was the winter of 1853, and then even closer psychic distance would be Henry hated winter, and then the closest would be God, he hated these damn winters. Most writing technique would tell you to go as close as possible, and this is a very modern approach because it allows for this immediacy and allows for this emotion and allows for this character voice. But there are some benefits to being a little bit farther back. For example, a distant narrator feels more historical and authoritative. You can state more things as fact. A close narrator feels very subjective. It feels very emotional. Normally, you want to zoom out if you want to compress time or you want to reframe the theme. For an example, George R. R. Martin often widens his distance at the beginning of chapters to kind of set the scene and political context, and then later in the chapter he'll narrow way closer into psychic distance to get more into that character's head. A master of psychic distance uses both of these ends of the spectrum for different parts of his story and to achieve different things.
When you're taking a look at some of that stuff, you'll see why certain authors are now trying to fuse different POVs together. Like we talked about the retrospective first person. When you're looking at like Assassin's Apprentice, if you framed it around a narrator and this is your character, they can zoom out to compress time, to reframe the theme, or make jokes or whatever, and then they can zoom back in to intensify their situation. And the same thing with Name of the Wind. There's an easy way to compress time and jump in and out of the story to redirect things because there's different uses of POV.
As pretty much everything with narrative, POV is a tool that the more that you are in control of it, the better your stories will get. When you first look at POV, it might be super confusing and there might be so many things that you can choose from. Hopefully this video kind of helped give you a general overview of what these POVs can be used for and what their different strengths and weaknesses are. Don't be scared, try some of these things out. Explore these different POVs, try them. If you're really locked into one, try a different one. See if it can open the way that you do narratives.
We want them to feel liberating, so you see all these different types and these different things that are available to you, and you can start to think, okay, I want to tell a very emotional story. I want to tell an epic story, and you can go down some of these paths and explore how authors have done it. And so read these examples, look into them, and emulate them, and see how you can take the flavors of some of these point of views and craft your own story. That'll about do it from us. We will see you next time.
Hey guys, if you really like this video, check the one down below. You might like that one too.
And if you really like what you see, click here to subscribe.